All right. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Ananya Bhattacharya. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Ananya is a PhD student from University of Toronto. His research focuses on interactive AI-driven system that adapts to individual and social contexts. He has various publications in top SCI conferences like CSCWU and also in community like HCOM and Triple AI. And he has also some experience launch online like large scale intervention that impact like thousands of users. So with that, I will let Ananya take it away.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the nice introduction. Everyone can hear me all right and see my slides.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. My name is Ananya Bhattacharya. I'm a PhD candidate in computer science at the University of Toronto. I'm really excited to be here and talk about how we can design adaptive systems to empower psychosocial narratives. You're welcome to ask questions at any point, although we'll probably keep it brief. And as Brennan told me, there will be a dedicated time for discussion at the end.
Mhm.
All right. So before I start, you can raise your hand or express um, if any of these sound familiar to you. Like, do you sometimes feel overwhelmed managing responsibilities, struggle with procrastination, or do you find yourself feeling stressed? Do any of you feel that way?
I just
Never.
defended, so yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and while that's concerning, that's most of us. We often and share these feelings. And why do that happen? And why do we feel these sort of complex feelings? The truth is that our lives are rich, complex, and they're deeply shaped by the context we live in. At any moment, we are navigating a range of issues. Our responsibilities, our works, our family duties, our relationships, the social structure that we live in, the issues that we are facing, all of them collectively contribute to our well-being, how we think of our issues, how we make meaning to our experiences. Now, when we try to make sense of this complexity, uh, we always try to, or we always turn to narratives. Now, when I say narratives, I don't necessarily mean that stories. Uh, they are mental frameworks that give meaning to our experiences. They're how we take the threads of our experience and weave them into something meaningful. Like, think of this job talk, like how I'm presenting my work. All of us have different sort of narratives. Maybe you are experiencing some issues, maybe you have some research goals, you are working on something. So from that experience, from those factors, you are trying to form your own narrative of how we are at this present moment. And at a given moment, think of like a student who is probably stressed. Now, they have their exams, they may have their relationship issues, they live in a social structure, they have these all sorts of complex issues. Think of a parent who have like responsibilities, childcare duties, they have their career progression and goals, maybe have some elderly people to take care of. These two people have may have some similarities, but they have a very different narrative of their experience, their well-being. If you ask them to rate their stress level, they might say that they are experiencing stress, they are procrastinating, they are maybe experiencing similar issues. But the broader factors, the broader contextual things that are contributing to their experiences, that are often quite different and in many cases unique. Now, the problems with existing tools is that they often try to focus on some isolated symptoms or features and rely too much on quantifiable rating. As a result, they often ignore the broader narratives around people. when they are trying to support someone feeling stressed or experiencing procrastination, or providing or helping them set goals, they are focusing on some isolated things. They are following some frameworks, but they are not capturing the broader narratives, the broader challenges that are contributing to those issues. Now, when those happen, what what ends up being happening is that they give advice, they give suggestions that can come across as insensitive, or that don't acknowledge users' problems. Think of a tool that is designed to help you manage stress or reflect on stressful scenarios. Now, a, a text messaging system can suggest you to practice gratitude. It might ask you to think of three things you are grateful for. Now, that is a good advice that is backed by literature. But a student, they might interpret it in a way like, I'm thankful for deadlines, sleep deprivation, and cold coffee. Thanks for suggesting that. So when the suggestion that is coming, not considering these narratives, not considering this context, that can come across as generic or insensitive. And that goes the same way for a parent. They might be thankful, they might be sarcastically saying, like, I'm thankful for surviving another day of chaos barely. So we need to focus on designing tools that address the broader narratives, those challenges that students are facing, and the problems that a young parent is going through, and fit whatever we're suggesting in their context so that it can come across as sensitive and empathetic to their life context. Why this matters? Digital tools miss the opportunity to provide meaningful personalized support. When you are just sending generic messages, they are failing to resonate. Users feel unseen and unsupported. They struggle to find value in the provided support, and sometimes they may come across as insensitive. So, in my work, I design interactive AI-driven systems that understand and adapt to individual and social narratives. Um, in my PhD work, I have designed a few systems across several domains. I have designed systems to help people manage the stress, anxiety, and depression, help procrastination, help them set goals and plans that they can achieve over time, and also some of the complex issues like adapting to a new environment. I feel in AI too, I can take many of these ideas, many of those works, and extend them to help researchers manage their well-being, set goals, provide structured activities that can solve a range of problems like framing research works, or writing research papers. My work is connected by three very interconnected lines of work. In the first line of work, I foster meaning making through reflective narratives. I try to design systems that help people untangle the complexity in their experiences, try to make sense of what they are going through, and see if there is any solutions. In the second line of work, I tailor support. I design proactive systems that shows how someone can and go through similar experiences and overcome their challenges. And in the third line of work, I look into the broader socio-cultural narratives of well-being. So in this talk, I'm going to focus more on the first two lines of work and a little bit on the third line of work, if time permits. I generally publish in CHI and CSCW. I have published some papers that have got our best paper and honorable mention awards in CHI. But as I was saying, I collaborate with a range of scientists from other fields like psychology, applied ML, and statistics, and I often publish in those venues as well. And more recently, I have done some work in ICTD, Information and Communication Technology for Development, and I have been doing some work, particularly in the Global South context, in Bangladesh, where I'm originally from. So I'm doing some work there as well. I am very much driven by impact, and I'm very proud of some of the impacts that my work has done. I have been part of and contributed to the development of Small Steps SMS program, which has reached more than 10,000 users in North America. It's a 2-month intervention designed to help young adults manage anxiety and depression systems. I have deployed a range of classroom interventions in the Greater Toronto area that have gone to more than 2,000 students. And we are planning to launch a generative AI-driven intervention. I'm going to talk about that work as well. That is going to be deployed to more than 7,000 people. More recently, I have had the chance to collaborate with MSR, Microsoft Research, and work on incorporating personality traits in Microsoft Copilot. That work has recently been featured in a new Future of Work report 2024. And some of my work has also contributed to the policy changes in helplines in US and Bangladesh, partnership to end addiction and Khan Peteroi, which is a major helpline in Bangladesh. All right, so now I'm gonna talk about the 3 lines of work. But before that, I'm gonna take like a 10-second pause and see like whether anyone has any questions or comments. No. Okay, so let's start with my first line of work, fostering meaning making through reflective narratives. So in this line of work, what I try to do is I try to cultivate sense making, emotional regulation, and new possibilities. One representative work is we designed a structured activity through reflective questioning that help people reframe stressful experiences. They reflect on some stressful scenarios. They work through a step-by-step process, and they try to see whether there are alternative explanations possible. But similar works I have done to promote gratitude and planning and goal setting as well. So let's look into this work, like how we can coach people to reframe narratives. So we designed a web platform to facilitate what we call RQA, reflective questioning activity. And when people enter this sort of web platform, we prompt them, think of a particular situation where you felt stressed or had a negative emotion. Now, once they do that, we ask a series of questions like, what's the situation? What part is most troubling? What are you thinking to yourself? What actions do you take? And when they ask this question, the generic experience that they're sharing, like, I feel like I'm falling behind at work and can't meet expectations, they identify certain components of their experience, like my manager hasn't been very supportive. Maybe I'm not cut out for this role. I avoid asking for help and procrastinate on tasks. So this sort of questionnaire or structured activity help them identify particular components that are contributing to their stress, their negative emotions. And then moving forward, we further ask questions that can help them identify the components, the particular trigger, high expectations at work, the particular behavior, thought, and feeling. And then they reflect on these particular components and reframe them. And the ideal expectation is that when they are experiencing high expectations at work, but we motivate them to think of a different way of explaining this, different thought that they can pursue, different behavior that they can take. Instead of avoiding tasks and help, they can come up with that they should break tasks into small steps and ask questions. And at the end, and instead of thinking they're not good enough for this role, they could just remind themselves that it's normal to feel overwhelmed, and they could see this opportunity, a situation as an opportunity to grow and focus on certain skills they can learn. Now, obviously, this is very ideal scenario, but when we deployed this to 200 participants and compared it with existing baseline activities like very traditional cognitive reframing exercises, we found out that they were significantly better at reducing stress, and the users were viewing them more helpful. The perception of the utility of the intervention was much higher than the baseline activities. And in terms of time commitment, although the length was pretty similar, these sort of structured activities, they were perceived to require less time. So these sort of activities can help people reduce at least momentary stress, structured thoughts, identify flaws in their thinking. But when you deploy this sort of activity over time for a longer period of engagement, we see the need for personalization, because this sort of structure can get monotonous over time. And when they practice it in the or context of their life, there is need for adaptivity. So moving forward, what we did was we designed an LLM enhanced version to provide structure support, at the same time made it more interactive, so that it's just not asking the same questions. So we designed an LLM enhanced version of it that was programmed to follow the same structure that I just showed, but it was also programmed to follow interactive questions. It was designed to ask follow-up questions, clarification questions, and have some level of empathy and personification. So when someone was sharing that they are having some tension at work, it was acknowledging that. It was and it was the response was designed in a way that acknowledges this, and also takes the same structure but adapts for the user's context. And then it follows the same sort of structured scenario, but reflects all of those answers in the context of trigger, thought, feeling, behavior that I just showed. So this sort of interactive conversational agent, we deployed it to 100 users, and we see that they can really help people. They contributed to reduction of 9% stress. So this work provides one example where we can take some sort of existing structure, some validated methods, and then how we can use emerging technologies like generative AI or large language model, follow them, make them more interactive, have some components of empathy and personification, and help people structure their thoughts and organize their behaviors. We did a large field work to look into the long-term engagement aspects. We designed surveys, design workshops, interviews, we deployed text messaging probes. We identified a range of factors that contributed to engagement with such agents. We saw emotions, mood, business levels. If I oversimplify a bit, we saw that when people were experiencing negative emotions, or they were in a state of high business, they were looking for more simpler activities. Asking the 10 questions or 15 questions, that can come across as overwhelming. So we can shorten these sort of questions. And also what we can show is we can show them supportive texts from others, like others who have practiced this activity, how they have replied to these sort of questions. On the other hand, when they're experiencing positive emotions, or when they have more time, say at a weekend evening, we can motivate them to do this sort of active writing activity. And those sort of times are better suited for reflection and planning. We designed some text messaging dialogues that was eventually part of the Small Steps SMS program that I just mentioned. And as you can see, like when someone is experiencing low mood or experiencing negative emotions, we show them some text from others. But when they are experiencing positive emotions, we motivate them to take part in an active writing activity. So these messaging dialogues are part of a Chi-23 paper that eventually got best paper, and also, as I said, became part of the Small Steps SMS program that have gone to more than 10,000 people. Now, overall, all this line of work has contributed to help people become more aware of their emotions, contributed to enhanced perspective taking. In many cases, they have helped people explore alternative solutions to their problems. And also, what's interesting to me is they are not limited to the digital activity. Often, people were taking those activities, particularly in the post-study surveys and interviews. They were saying that they have learned these skills, and then they started practicing these sort of activities with their partners, with their friends in the real world. So they were taking this sort of digital activities, and they could apply them in the context of their lives. So that is more or less about the first line of work. Yeah, I can take a 10-second pause here and see if anyone has any question. If not, I can move forward. So in this line of work, I was in the first line of work, rather, I was focusing on helping people make sense of their experiences, helping them understand what is going on in their lives. But we also understand that people can't solve their problems. We also need proactive support. So in this second line of work, what I try to do is I try to help people learn and apply evidence-based psychology principles, but I try to do them in situating in relatable scenarios so that they're not didactic. People could see how they can take certain principles, healthy behaviors, they can see them in relatable scenarios, relatable narratives, and apply them in the context of their life. So this line of work focused on first understanding the desirable elements of digital stories, and then and looks into how we can personalize these stories to reflect users' unique challenges. So we started with a fieldwork with 42 young adults. Many of them have elevated symptoms of depression and anxiety, and we conducted design workshops, text message deployment, and we identified four qualities. Authenticity, the support that is provided, that should be authentic, they should look like they're coming from real people. uh, it should communicate concrete takeaways. It should not be just stories like Aesop's fables, if you are familiar with that. They should end with some sort of concrete takeaways. And this sort of support should not be one way. The stories should not be one way. They should encourage reflection, they should encourage active participation, they should ask questions. And the stories should not be like too filmy. They should balance positivity. They should end on a hopeful outcome, but the outcome should not be like people have made tremendous program. Rather, they are making small progresses. So this is one example of stories. Like you can see that we show them someone who was broke, who had some problems with their parents. Uh, they were seeing some failures as a never-ending pattern of defeat, and then they communicated with their roommates, friends, and identified that it's not uncommon to see one or two unpleasant events as part of this sort of pattern of defeat. So this is an message about overgeneralization, and how we communicate it is instead of just defining it, we place it in a relatable scenario and help users learn how this can happen in the context of their lives. And then we also ask reflection questions like how whether they have experienced similar challenges or what strategies they might take um, to overcome these sort of challenges. Now, these sort of stories were really well received. People could see the benefits. They were communicating very well. But the challenge here lies that we can only make so many stories, and people have so much unique experiences, unique problems that they experience. So what we tried to do was we understood that the stories need to reflect user struggles, and it can't be done with like a single research team. So we thought of how we can scale those stories. And here again, we look into LLMs and generative AI. But at the same time, we understand that the LLM and her stories, LLMs are not trained to write these sort of stories. They should follow certain structure and guidelines. So we created a framework to personalize these sort of stories. And what we did was we first let people express their concern. And in this case, it could be like, I'm a young mom and I'm always worried about my kids. And then we provide some adaptation guidelines. We provide base stories for adaptation. So we take the stories that we have designed from our fieldworks, we have deployed as interventions. We feed the story qualities that they should stick to. But at the same time, we change the wrapper and place it in the context of their lives. And how that looks like is once someone is sharing their challenges. I'm a young mom and I'm always worried. I'm having this and that problem. The story becomes about someone who is a young parent and juggling work and family, and how they saw one or two worries as a signs of constant pattern of danger. So we take the same idea of overgeneralization, we feed these stories, but we change the wrapper so that users can see how they can adapt these stories, how these are applicable in the context of their life or their problems. So we again did large studies with 346 participants, and we saw that, and this was very surprising to me as well, like we were expecting it to do better in certain aspects, but in almost all of the aspects, it was doing better, including reduction in belief in negative thought. People were able to place the applicability of stories in the context of their lives because it was just talking about their lives, their situations, their problems, and the stories except for authenticity, they were doing better in communicating the takeaways, promoting reflection, and even being relatable. In terms of authenticity, we see that people could spot the AI writing in places, people could spot the tone of how AI was writing, but the helpfulness aspect of it, like how it was helping them see applicability of stories, how they could see the applicability of certain psychology principles, that was really well received by our users, and it can help them and apply the communicated methods in the context of their lives. And this work has got very well sort of appreciation from research community as well as the clinical psychology community, and it was very recently selected for a competitive mega study, and we plan to deploy this, I think, near the middle of the year to more than 7,000 people. But everything is not good. LLMs, and when we do this sort of work, there are problems. And one of the major challenge was LLMs may sometimes get too aligned with what a user said. So you can see that it was talking about a young parent going through some problems, and it can feel a bit like it is just spewing back exactly what the user was saying or copy pasting answers. So the users are looking for ways to refine whatever message, advice they were getting, and they wanted to get involved. They wanted to change things, particularly for long-term engagement, because the same sort of structure, same tone, same writing, that can come across as a bit monotonous. So then I started thinking about how can we provide further interactivity to users so that they can refine and tailor the LLM generated advice. And in this context, I designed Spark, and we focus on procrastination here. It's a web-based tool that utilizes GPT-4 to offer context-specific advice, but with provided elements of human-AI collaboration, users can customize tone, instructions, they can make custom requests, they can change length. So this is how it looks like. Users can express their situation in any detail they want, but they can also express their preferences on their preferred tones, their directedness, how much instruction they do want. They can also come up with their own prompts to generate the advice. And what is important is they can do it and they can change it even after the advice is generated. They can they can make specific requests, like the message should include a step-by-step example. It should introduce the topic. It should explain the key points. It should conclude with a summary or next steps. We also provided interactive options, like they can ask for certain keywords. They can basically make any request, any words that the advice should contact or reflect any unique situations that they want the story to communicate. So when we designed these interactive options and we took to many users who have procrastination, it got very positive appreciation. Obviously, people were playing around with it. And one positive aspect we saw from our deployments was that people became more appreciative about the AI involvement, because now they felt that they have control over their interaction, because they could change the advice they were getting. They could communicate their preferences in sort of structured way. So this work was published in Kai 24, and it got an honorable mention, but it also set up some nice design implications for the role of generative AI and personality support. So one was obviously the need for structured support with adaptability. We were seeing that this sort of support came up with some structure. Users could feel like if I took the work from my first line of work, like the time and the mood and energy, AI can adapt this sort of structure based on those contextual factors. But the human AI collaboration aspect, that was probably more prominent in the findings. People felt that they have control over their interaction. They could see how they can communicate AI to have the desired outcome. The last one that is also very interesting, and that shows that we should be careful of how we deploy AI in real world. particularly the expert consultants, they were communicating that there should be a balance in providing guidance and independent exploration. There should be cap in how much users use that, because once people become too accustomed to this sort of structured suggestions, they might start losing their ability to do independent exploration. So that is one area of concern that we need to be cautious about. Overall, we could see that this line of work, they contributed to reduction in belief in challenging thought. And they provided validation of struggle, because once they see stories from others or they see stories from LLMs, they could see that their struggle is valid. And those sort of stories often offered a feeling of connection as well. People could see that they are not alone in the world experiencing similar problems, and there are other people who are going through similar experiences, and there are ways to overcome this sort of problems. So this is the end of my second line of work. And before I move to the third, I would again take like a 10-second pause and see if there is any question. Okay. There is no. If there isn't, I can move to the third line of work. I'm gonna briefly cover this line of work. As you can imagine, this line of work, I tried to explore the broader socio-cultural context of well-being and the role of technology in addressing them. And this is more forward-looking line of work. In the previous line of work, I was building systems, I was deploying tools that was used by real people. This work is more forward-looking. I try to understand the socio-cultural context, the challenges experienced by people, and how we can think about addressing them in the next few years. I have done some work in North America, where I try to investigate how social contexts influence well-being and engagement with digital tools, and also did similar work in Bangladesh and tried to identify the gaps where digital support systems fail to address local needs and cultural values. So in North America, I did a 2-month-long study with multiple interviews and design workshops to understand the role of social context in influencing engagement with digital tools like text messaging or LLM-based tools. And I identified several disruptors of engagement. So these are broader factors or challenges that just don't allow people to engage with a digital tool. And like, no matter how good or bad a support system is, these are broader challenges that just don't let people engage with the system. So some of the disruptors, and I'll also talk about some of the course that we got. It's like a young parent or like someone who is in school, who has their kids in kindergarten, they just struggle to find time for self-care. So when they have some free time, they just don't have the bandwidth to engage with some sort of digital tools, and they feel that they can use it to get the laundry done, clean up their kids' room, or make sure everything is good. And we got similar comments from about some of the professionals as well. Like, they have got bills, they have got other things, they have got a family to feed. So when these sort of broader challenges come up, they just struggle to dedicate time for their well-being. They just find it very difficult to prioritize self-care activities. And there are all sorts of other disruptors as well, like illnesses, relocation, job changes. Those are broader factors that have nothing to do with algorithms or things like that. They are just life challenges that contribute to disengagement with digital well-beings, and at the same time, they also have a very high impact on someone's well-being, stress, and other aspects of their life. I did similar investigations in Bangladesh, and I collaborated with a major Bangladeshi helpline, Khan Peteroi, investigated 2-year call data, did interviews with support providers, and field study with 40 Bangladeshi young adults. And we got similar as findings as well, like the responsibilities and the financial stress. Those were contributing to disengagement with digital tools. But we also saw some other challenges that are not reflected in digital support, and at the same time that were very important in that context as well. For example, our female participants, they were often talking about relationship with in-laws. Like many of the young adults, they get married quite early, and they have struggled maintaining their like studies and exams, and at the same time they have certain duties to perform to their in-laws. So those sort of issues often contribute to their experience, their narratives of well-being. There is a broader expectation to manage the extended family, and religion is much more prominent there, and that have a high impact on how they view well-being as well. So the broader themes from this line of work was that there is a big tension globally between and self-care and responsibilities. People often don't just find time to prioritize self-care, and this points to the fact that we should design tools that integrate those sort of broader responsibilities that they have in their life, support achieving or performing those responsibilities and achieving those goals, and the self-care activities should be put in those contexts. And there are situations where people felt that their solutions just are not within their control, or some of the social structures, maintaining relationship with in-laws, or those often ask for the need for targeted socioeconomic support. And particularly in the context of global south, there is limited acknowledgement of local values, traditions, and religion. And we need to think about how we can and bring those in the design, because most of the time when we design certain tools, they're coming from the global north, and just placing them in the context of global south do not always work. So that's the end of my third line of work. And if I go back to these threads, I design systems that help people make sense of their experiences, try to identify solutions to their problems, just untangle the complexity of their lives. In the second line of work, I take those ideas but try to provide proactive support. I try to show them how they can apply certain healthy behaviors in the context of their lives. And then in the third line of work, I try to understand the broader narratives of well-being, broader issues that contribute to well-being, and how we can design tools to address them. Now, what's next? How can I adapt my works to align with AI2 or semantic scholars' interests? How do those ideas replicate to the context of what AI2 and semantic scholar is doing? Now, think about some broader challenges in research, or what challenges we researchers face. Time management is a big issue. We often have so many goals and projects, and I'm sure that is probably even more complicated for you. Like you may have so many goals to achieve, so many projects to juggle between, and like you have your personal and family duties too. It is very difficult to manage time, achieve multiple goals, complete the tasks at hand. And if I become more concrete, writing papers is another challenge as well. In all these sort of aspects, researchers need structure. They need structured support that can help them solve the challenges, or at least understand the challenges and then solve them in some way. So we can design structured goal setting activities to define the goals, to understand the multiple challenges that exist in our life, and then how we can go about solving them. One very simple structure could be just defining the goal, break them into subtasks, identify the dependencies, and then based on that, plan and evaluate. And there are all sorts of goal setting frameworks that exist. Now, if I look at this framework, that is very similar to the first line of work, the reflective narrative framework I was talking about, like trigger, thought, feeling, behavior. They have different goals, they have different components, but the structured aspect, they look pretty similar. So what I plan to do is I can design adaptive support for this sort of goal setting activities. I can adapt this sort of structure in the context of conversational agents or texting systems, and feed those structure into the design of the systems that researchers can use to solve this sort of multiple responsibilities or help achieve goals. And I can then bring in the human AI collaboration aspect as well, so that over time users can refine their goals, identify the dependencies, add new stuff, and collectively with AI they can go about solving their challenges and problems. And this can be adapted to any sort of activities or any sort of challenges. Like when we're writing the introduction section or when we're writing a paper the night before the deadline, we need structure because it is not easy to write a 10-page paper or a 15-page paper. We often have, I mean, when we're starting our PhD, we have been taught about these sort of structured steps for introduction section. And that these sort of agents, they can provide you structure in and like drafting your research agenda, drafting the introduction section, what are the big problems that your research community is facing, and how we have gone about solving those problems. These sort of structured interactions can help us write papers, communicate our research problems, or even just initiate discussion among researchers. So that is one line of work that I think that can be very relevant to the AI2 and semantic scholar community. Now, if I go back to the challenges in research, and I have already mentioned that throughout my presentation, there are broader aspects that are contributing to these challenges. It could be team environment, it could be your personal duties, it could be professional goals, it could be the situation or how the organization is doing. There could be a range of factors that are contributing to these challenges. So we need to design technologies that understand these broader narratives. How we can develop these broader narratives about researchers, users, and we can't always just make chatbots and ask questions. There needs to be better, smarter way of doing this. So I am very interested in designing framework for implicit user narrative construction that don't always have to ask questions. And how it can be done is it can be looking at your calendars, like how busy you are. It can and gather understanding about your business level, your tasks. It can look into the texting platforms or the professional platforms you are using. It can look into overleaf and see what's the state of the paper that you are planning to submit it next week. And when it looks into all of these aspects, it can gather uh, some understanding or quite a broader understanding about your business level, your commitments, goals, responsibilities, and then it can provide support. And I mean, when I was talking with Pao, and I understood that there is a very big interest in developing a central system to connect these internal tools. So I think this line of work fits very well with AI2 and semantic scholars' interest as well. And we can use this sort of broader narratives to provide just-in-time adaptive support. And in this context, I can extend my works on support based on mood and emotional states. We can identify periods of low or high business from calendars. During low business, we can design planning activities, help people set goals and actions. And during high business, we can also send reminders and motivate people to act on plans or just simply take breaks because people are just so overwhelmed. Lastly, I'm very interested in designing multi-level support. So far, what I've been talking about is interventions that intervene or hit at an individual level, that is just communicated to individuals. But there are other ways of doing it. We can intervene at a team level. We can send messages or support to a group of people together. We can message at a Slack channel where people are working at the same projects. And I'm very interested in this sort of designing team level support infrastructure, particularly when people are working on complex projects. We can introduce like weekly check-in activities where team members share their current workload, challenges, and emotional state. And based on those, we can also do dynamic task redistribution. We can motivate collaborative problem-solving activities. We need to find ways of doing that, and they need research. But this sort of work can foster peer support and contribute or provide support that are just not possible at an individual level, but can be way more impactful, can impact a lot of people at the same time. So In conclusion, I understand that navigating personal and social challenges require making sense of our narratives. Human life is just so complex, and it's time we design systems that acknowledge these broader narratives. So I am interested in designing these sort of systems that can help people untangle life's complexities and adapt to their narratives so that we can solve the big problems that we have in our life. So that was my work. I really thank you for your attention. I'm very grateful to the funders who have supported my work, Mental Health America, NSERC, Microsoft, of SRI, WNR, and I couldn't have done it without the support from my collaborators, the professors who have provided a lot of support in my work, and my friends and lab mates who have been integral to my works as well. And yeah, that was my talk. If you want to know more about me, you can scan this QR code. You can send me emails, and yeah, I'll stop here and see if you have any questions. Thank you.
Right. Any questions?
I guess I could start. So I really like your work around like personalization and intervention. So we have been having similar discussion where um, we also kind of believe that intervention has to be personalized in order for it to be useful and not disruptive. Um, so on that line, I kind of have two questions. One is we've sort of been thinking about this in the group setting. So you're trying to personalize to a group of user in a personal in a shared space like a Slack channel.
Yeah.
So the first question is just wondering if you have any thoughts around expanding your work on these like personalizing to user preferences to a group setting. So that's one. The other one is also related. I see a lot of your interfaces about sort of explicitly elicit user preferences where you have these controls where you can express how you want the system to behave. Wondering what your thoughts on trying to do that more implicitly or maybe more in situ instead of trying to do this kind of more effortful setting in the beginning. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot for these questions, and they're very relevant to my interest as well. So the first question about intervening at a group level. So that was what I'm very interested in. I'm thinking of designing systems that can intervene people at a team level. And how we can go about doing it is we obviously have some information about think about like a group of people who are working on a project or on the same project, and we have these 2-week deadlines or 3-week deadlines. So we can design interventions that can and obviously promote check-ins and look into like foster peer support, but we can also take the workloads, like how much work you are doing or what work you are doing and what sort of person you are, and then take those ideas based on the contextual factors that we have, like immediacy of deadlines, and then we can design interventions that can obviously send like regular check-ins, but also like adapt those sort of support based on when a deadline is approaching or the time of the day or near the end of a working day. Like what have you achieved, what the team has achieved this today or this week, what sort of problems people are facing. And I think that is one line of work that has a lot of promise, particularly in the context of like achieving a group goal or team goal. And at the same time, it can also foster our peer support and help people understand what is going on with teammates and how we can like help each other in achieving a common collective goal. So that is the first question. And the second question was about implicit narratives. What I would say is, yeah, I'm interested in those sort of work as well. And I'm thinking of designing this sort of frameworks. And one way of doing that, I've started looking into calendars, which give pretty solid idea of your commitments and meetings. Like if you have like too many meetings on a certain day, that kind of indicates that you are probably very busy. So when we integrate these sort of tools, calendar being one of them, there could be Slack channels, and even like overleaf. Like if you want to submit a paper and your overleaf is not that full, then and that kind of gives the indication that you are probably not working on the paper, or you do need to work on your paper. So I'm thinking of integrating those sort of interfaces or tools to uh, design an implicit narrative, so that we can provide more proactive support, and users just don't need to like actively write what they are going through or what their challenges are.
Thanks. Yeah, I like both answers. Some of the things you said about group settings are also stuff that we've discussed as goals of doing intervention in a group setting.
Yeah.
I like observing how the user is doing different things in different places. Also makes sense to me. It feels like maybe the next step is some kind of user model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any question? If not, I have a question.
Sure.
So as Joseph has mentioned, we have been thinking about personalization and also like trying to understand what the user is doing a little bit. But stepping back a little bit, there is like they have previous line of work that look into personalization and trying to prove the benefit or the gain that you have by providing people personalized experience, right? But it seems to be something that is difficult to measure. So in the case of the project that you mentioned earlier with personalized message, like what kind of thing that you do in a comparison to non-personalized experience that show that personalized experience is providing benefit to the user in some way?
Sorry, I couldn't get the question.
So in the project that you mentioned,
Yeah.
you said you showing that personalized experience is benefit user in some way, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can you go into a little bit more details on how you did that?
Yeah, sure. So I think when we are evaluating the personalization aspect, I think we should look into both. In that project, so that project we were designing stories to communicate psychology principles, and also we were looking into the impact on like belief in negative thought. So how we were measuring the personalization benefits was we were looking into two aspects. One is how it was doing as an intervention, which is the same as a non-personalized. And in that way, we took some outcomes like, say, impact on negative thought, impact on emotions, or how much did it inspire solution. So those were the intervention outcomes, so that we can compare like whether the personalized thing was doing better than the non-personalized intervention. And then we were also looking at other aspects which are more relevant to personalization aspect. So that means we are looking into the relatability, like how much the situation that the story was talking about, you could relate to it. How much did it feel authentic? So when we're doing this sort of work, often what I see is that either we're looking at how, in this case, an intervention, how it was doing as an intervention, or we just look at how much personalization you are doing, like whether it could talk about your problems as well. I feel that when we personalize things, we need to do both ways. And we need to look into the personalization aspect. We need to see like whether the personalization is working well, like whether it is taking something and adapting it to other contexts. And at the same time, we often forget that at the end of the day, it is trying to achieve a larger goal, which is help people, maybe in this case, reframe their thoughts or change their emotions. So I was also looking at as a intervention, just forgetting about the personalization aspect, how much it was doing as an intervention. So long story short, I evaluated the quality of personalization and also evaluated the quality as an intervention as well.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I am curious about if you have thoughts on how one might try to develop benchmarks for the AI community to try to measure progress on these tasks. And just do you have thoughts on that?
So just to clarify, benchmarks on AI tools or benchmarks on how much it was helping people?
Whatever the best outcomes are. I mean, you're using in your
Yeah.
experiments, you use particular AI approaches at particular points in time, and how can we continue to measure that over time, and then try to get the AI community excited about making progress?
Yeah, I think the way to do it is there is a lot. I mean, there is a lot of work in the sort of behavioral science and psychology that have deployed interventions, that have deployed these systems, and that don't use AI at all. And those have helped people in a certain way as well. So I think I still believe we are in a very early stage. So I think the very early stage of benchmark could be doing those systems that exist and comparing with the AI systems and see how much they are contributing or extending the benefits to those non-AI systems. So I think the non-AI systems, at least in our, they provide a good baseline because there have been years of research people have been doing. And then based on how much the AI is improving the non-AI systems, we can think about like how AI can contribute, and there are ways where AI should not contribute as well, or AI might be making things worse. So I think comparison with those non-AI systems that exist could be a good benchmark, and then over time we have AI things that are surpassing the non-AI systems. We can take those and make those benchmarks as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Anyone else have question in the next minute? Okay, going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, all right. We have no more time, but thank you very much, Ananya. This is a great talk. And
So much.
I think Brandon is maybe gonna take it from here, or do I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. And also
I'll stay on to meet with Ananya.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Brandon, too.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.